Hey, everybody, and welcome back.
For today's deep dive, we're going to be looking at Exodus chapter 9.
And we're using this really cool study, online Bible study from My Christian Space.
It is really insightful, and we're going to be talking about individual choice, God's power, and divine mercy.
Oh, yeah.
Some really big topics.
Yep.
So
I think what's really fascinating about this chapter is it's not just the plagues.
it goes beyond that. It really dives into these theological questions about faith and choices that we even see today.
Yeah, totally. And it's like, what would we do?
If we were in that situation.
So for those who need a refresher,
Exodus chapter 9 is where things really start to ramp up between Moses and Pharaoh.
the warnings have been given, and now we're seeing the consequence.
Of Pharaoh just refusing to let the Israelites go.
Right.
But here's the thing. These plagues weren't just random.
Not at all.
Right.
What's so interesting is each one targeted.
Egyptian beliefs.
Okay.
Remember, they were polytheistic.
They worshipped a whole bunch of gods.
Many associated with nature and animals.
Right, like Ra, the sun god, or Apis, the bull god.
Exactly.
So when the plagues start hitting their livestock,
turning water into blood, even giving them boils?
it's a direct attack on their belief system.
Whoa.
Imagine what that would have been like.
I mean...
Their gods that they thought controlled the world were being overpowered by this one god.
It's like God saying, you think these guys are powerful?
Let me show you what real power is.
Right.
And then there's this thing about the boils on the magician.
Oh, that's a really good point. It says they couldn't even stand before Moses because of the boils.
I mean, they were supposed to be the most powerful.
I know.
And they're struck down.
Talk about a power move.
Right. God's power is greater than
any magic or sorcery.
It really makes you think
about what power really is, right?
If the magicians are powerless against God,
who can stand against him?
But that leads to another point that I saw
in the commentary.
And I thought it was really cool.
It talks about witnessing versus transformation.
And how a testimony is powerful.
But it's the power of God that changes a heart.
Yeah, and that's all throughout Exodus.
Look at there.
He sees all this power.
But he's still hardened.
Right.
What does it take to really change your heart?
Yeah.
To change your whole belief system and your actions?
It's like you can show someone all the proof in the world.
But something deeper has to happen.
Right.
Right. So then as these plagues escalate, we see a shift.
From affecting possessions to physical suffering.
This progression is really intense.
It is.
And this escalation...
There's a pattern we see a lot.
In stories of divine judgment.
Not just the Bible.
Wow.
It's like these wake-up calls.
To get someone's attention.
But even great suffering sometimes doesn't do it.
That's a good point.
Are we that stubborn as humans?
That we can go through so much and still not change.
It's a tough thought.
But amidst all this judgment...
there's also this glimmer of mercy.
And we see this in the detail about the hailstorm.
Where it says not all the crops were destroyed.
That's a good point.
It's like God saying, I'm not trying to wipe everyone out.
Right.
There's still a chance.
Yeah, and the commentary actually brings this up too.
About how some Egyptians actually listened and took action.
They sheltered their livestock.
They took cover.
And that's huge because it highlights individual choice.
Right.
Even though Pharaoh's resisting.
Other people are like, yeah, no, I'm going to listen to this.
This God is powerful.
That really speaks to the idea of free will.
Yeah.
Even in judgment.
You can choose.
And those choices have consequences.
So it's not just about following the leader.
People had to think for themselves.
Decide how they would respond.
It makes me feel like I'm right there watching this unfold.
And wondering what I would do.
Well, let's talk about Pharaoh for a second.
Because he has these moments where he almost repents.
Okay.
He asks for the plagues to stop, but it just feels kind of hollow.
It does.
Doesn't it?
It's like he's desperate for relief.
But his heart hasn't changed.
Yeah, as soon as it's over, he's back to his old ways.
And Moses even calls him out.
He says, I know you still won't fear the Lord. So we see this tension between outward pleas.
And inward defiance.
Like, there are no atheists in foxholes.
It's easy to turn to faith when things are bad.
But true change.
It takes more.
So even though his heart is hardened, God still shows mercy.
By ending the plagues when he asks this push and pull between judgment
and compassion.
Exactly.
That's the heart of this chapter.
This dance between God's power
and his willingness to give chances.
Even when people reject him.
Yeah. If God's in control, why even give Pharaoh all these chances?
I mean, it's a question that theologians have been debating forever.
It is. And it takes us to some interesting theological ideas.
Okay. I'm all ears.
Well, some say it's predestination.
Others say it's just to show God's authority.
There's no easy answers.
But the commentary says something interesting.
Okay, what does it say?
Well, it compares this time of plagues to what Revelation calls the last days.
Hold on, really?
How so?
Well, just like warnings were given before each plague,
There's this idea that in the end times,
there will be signs and warnings.
for people to choose faith or face judgment.
Wow. I've never thought about it like that.
So even with all this chaos, there's still choice.
This opportunity to decide your fate.
Exactly.
That's heavy.
So we've covered a lot.
The details of the plagues, this idea of judgment, God's power and mercy,
Even a little bit of end time stuff.
all connected to one chapter.
It's incredible.
It's amazing how much is packed in here.
Absolutely.
And this is just the beginning.
There's so much more.
But before we get to the end of Pharaoh,
And what that means, let's pause.
and just think for a second,
Okay.
what stands out to you so far?
Yeah, that's a good question.
It's easy to get caught up in the story.
But these are big themes. Choice, faith, the nature of God.
These are things that go beyond just this story.
So as you're listening, think about how this applies to you.
Your own life.
Your own challenges, your own decisions.
We'll be right back to keep going with our deep dive into Exodus chapter 9.
Welcome back.
It's crazy how this story
Of Exodus, especially this chapter.
still speaks to us today,
I know.
thousands of years later.
It really does. It's this struggle of faith and power.
It's just part of being human.
It's true.
Before we pause, we were talking about how Pharaoh,
Keeps going back on his word.
after seeing God's power,
It's like he's blind to the truth.
and that brings us to what the commentary calls.
The final hardening of his heart.
Oh, yeah,
This is a big moment
it is.
because it really shows us who Pharaoh is,
Okay,
especially with the hailstorm.
right.
He begs for relief.
But then when it stops,
He goes right back to his old ways. The text even says,
he sins still more.
by making himself hard-hearted.
Wow,
That's powerful.
it really is.
It shows how much we can fool ourselves,
How we cling to pride.
even when we know better.
It's like the more God shows him.
The more stubborn he gets.
That's an interesting thought.
And the commentary connects this,
To Revelation.
saying that just like Pharaoh had chances,
Humanity gets a time of grace.
before judgment.
That's intense.
It is.
But it comes back to choice.
Right.
Everyone
No matter when they lived,
has to choose how to respond to God.
open your heart or harden it.
So the plagues were terrifying,
Absolutely.
but they were also this chance.
For the Egyptians to really look at what they believed.
Yeah, it's like they had to ask themselves.
Do I trust?
Exactly.
And even in Pharaoh's court,
Some people did fear the Lord.
they weren't just following blindly.
Yeah.
The commentary mentions how
Some people sheltered their servants and livestock,
they saw what was coming.
and they made a different choice.
That's a good point.
It shows that even those close to power,
Can still choose differently.
faith is personal.
Yeah.
We answer to God for our own choices. It's like
Can't just blame others.
you have to own your actions.
Absolutely.
So zooming out from the story,
What are the big lessons here?
well, I think one is just how powerful God is.
Oh,
These weren't just random things.
God was in control.
Yeah. It's amazing to
And
think
the creator of everything is involved in our lives.
and can intervene like that.
Right.
But with that power,
We also see mercy.
that's right.
He keeps giving Pharaoh chances.
And he protects the Israelites.
Yeah,
That shows his compassion.
it does.
God is powerful and merciful.
That's a hard balance to grasp.
I know.
And it's that balance that makes this story so interesting.
It does.
Free will versus God's plan.
Big questions.
People are still debating that today.
Absolutely.
It's crazy how this old story,
It still speaks to us about life, faith in the universe,
it reminds us
that these aren't just ideas.
they affect how we live our lives.
So we've covered the plagues,
Faith choice, the nature of God.
even some end time stuff.
And remembering
This is just one way of looking at it.
there's so much more to Exodus chapter 9.
It's like it keeps giving.
Exactly.
That's what's so cool about the Bible.
It's a lot.
It speaks to everyone
It invites us to dig in and ask questions.
and figure out what it means to us.
Beautifully said.
So we'll be back in a bit.
To wrap up our deep dive into Exodus chapter 9,
But while we're gone,
think about these questions.
what does this story tell you about God?
About humanity.
About yourself?
We'll be back soon. All right, we are back for the final part of our deep dive.
Into Exodus chapter 9.
It has been quite a journey.
It has.
But before we wrap up,
I want to leave you with something to think about.
okay, I'm listening.
So imagine you're back in ancient Egypt,
You're just an average Egyptian,
going about your day.
and then boom,
These plagues start hitting.
the Nile turns to blood. Locusts fill the sky.
Boils erupt on your skin.
That would be terrifying.
I know.
Everything you know is being challenged.
The gods you trust.
The world you thought you knew.
It's all falling apart.
So here's the question.
What would you do?
Would you be like Pharaoh,
Clinging to your old beliefs?
trying to hold on
Or would you see the power of the one true God?
and seek his mercy?
That's a really tough question.
It's easy to judge Pharaoh.
But we all face challenges.
Moments that test our faith.
Make us question what we really believe.
Yeah, maybe not plagues of locusts.
But life throws us curveballs.
And in those moments,
Our choices matter.
they shape who we are,
Yeah.
how we see the world.
And how we relate to God.
This reminds us
That faith isn't just about rules.
it's about engaging with God,
Wrestling with doubt.
choosing to trust.
In something bigger than ourselves.
It's a journey,
It is.
not a destination.
We're always learning and growing.
Making choices that shape our path
And Exodus chapter 9,
shows us this struggle so vividly,
it's about power,
but also about free will
about consequences.
and this balance between judgment and mercy.
So well said.
It's a perfect way to wrap it up.
And on that note,
Thank you for joining us.
for this deep dive into Exodus chapter 9,
We hope it's made you think.
challenged your ideas and maybe inspired you to keep exploring.
The Bible is full of amazing stories.
It is.
Keep digging, keep questioning.
But keep seeking.
You never know what you might discover.
Thanks for listening.